So. All right. My New Year's resolution is not to count down the opening of my series. Hi, I'm Timothy Gager, and this is Virtual Fridays Dire Literary Series. And my guest tonight is Rick Moody, and Rick hardly needs an introduction at all. And what we will do is we'll just show everybody the website. This is Rick's website, rickmoodybooks.com. You can find out all about it. It's got these links that normally you think are opening windows, but they open all kinds of fun things. It's like a Christmas stocking, you know, like you hit the button and it unwraps. But this is rickmoodybooks.com. So make sure you check it out. Rick is a very well-known, acclaimed writer, and I don't have to tell you folks there, you guys are here because of Rick, and I looking forward to his reading. So why don't you take it away, sir?
Thanks, Tim. So I'm working on this newish novel. It's been going on for a little while, but it keeps morphing because it's kind of contemporary, and the conceptual apparatus is as follows. It's called 52 Descriptions of Flag Burning, and every section of the novel, and there's one for each state, and one for DC and one for Puerto Rico. Every section has some glancing relationship to or description of an incident in which a flag is burned. That's the concept. And it sort of has every kind of person and every kind of everything in it, kind of a big encyclopedic free-for-all. So anyway, I was going to read this brand new section, which is about the state of Pennsylvania. In fact, it's called King of Prussia. So it's pretty long, so I'm just going to read the sort of opening 5 pages of it. And it's sort of set during the summer of 2020. So you'll quickly grasp what's at stake for this particular character. King of Prussia, May 19, 2020. Dear Bobby, it's your grandfather here again, writing you from the Serendipity Village, which is just half a mile past the IGA and near to several convenience stores if you ever want to swing by. I think they have video games over at the Tofi Mart, which is just up from the corner. If I crane my neck some and really mash my face up against the window, I can see some action over there. Maybe you can't visit right now. I think no one is allowed to visit, actually. I'm sending this by email because your mom said that actual letters are taking extra long to get there, and also that she has to disinfect the mail, and that takes time, which she does not have. You know, I used to love getting letters when I was your age because I used to love looking at the stamps. The stamps were cheaper then, and you used to have to lick them to get them to stick on there good. Sometimes you licked the envelopes too. I can still taste the stamp adhesive if I think back hard. Anyway, I just might send you some real letters because you might enjoy the stamps, and maybe you could start a stamp collection. I have a sheet of excellent Marvin Gaye stamps here. Do you know Heard It Through the Grapevine? Ever heard that? Now that was a song. My own grandfather had a stamp collection when he was a young man, and it was huge and worth thousands. And somehow it got stolen. I can't remember how exactly. He was heartbroken about that stamp collection, which was worth thousands. And maybe that's part of why he was in a shitty mood all the time, besides having just emigrated from Lviv, where he and his family were oppressed. Hey, I don't want to write much longer because my hands hurt, and it's time for the gruel downstairs. I just wanted to say, I love you so much, Bobby. Always thinking of you. More soon. Gramps. May 20, 2020. Dear Bobby, I forgot yesterday when I said I was going down for gruel that no one is allowed to go down for gruel right now because we all have to stay in our rooms. From a culinary angle, what's the big deal? It's the same food here in my room. But if you're talking about the human society part of the story, the situation is grim. Bob, if you ever wanted to talk online on FaceTime or what have you, I'd be happy to talk because right now it's a whole lot of nothing, which, if I'm not careful, means afternoon talk shows. I'm still sharp, my man. I have to keep it that way. I'm one of the youngest residents in here, and I wouldn't be here at all if your grandmother was still living. But I have circulation problems. Your mom can't take care of me because she should be taking care of you. And so I'm in here with these geezers. It's fine. I have HBO. I hope you don't mind if I send this in an envelope old school. I like sending letters because there's some kind of heart-crushing sentiment that you get from a letter, the physical thing. And that's true even if your hopes are then dashed because it's a letter from your grandfather. At least you get the stamps, which, we used to have to lick. Today we have the singer Marvin Gaye on the stamps. Have you heard Let's Get It On? Okay, signing off, Bobby. I love you so much. Gramps. May 22, 2020. Bobby, I want to tell you that I just cannot live without the baseball season. I cannot. I called over there today to your place and your mom said that she was online for work and she doesn't have time to supervise your use of the phone. And anyway, you have school online. And she said I should not call without warning that I was going to call. And really what I should do, she further said, was make a call, leaving a voicemail, suggesting a time for a later phone call. I swear she doesn't trust me, Bob, but I have long since changed my ways. And now I am a grandpa, all kindness and sweetmeats. Mostly, I'm just reading mysteries and watching stand-up comedy. What I was wanting to say, Bobby, was this. The absence of a baseball season is like a nuclear blast in the middle of regular American civilization, or like an extra big underground sinkhole, like the kind that swallows an entire convenience store and the parking lot beside it. If they knew how much codgers such as myself rely on baseball to have talking points, why then people would think more carefully about avoiding cancellation of the season at all costs. Seems like maybe they're talking it over now, the owners and the players union, about how there might be a season. I believe the Phillies are a team of destiny and could be even in a shortened season. You can take that phrase, team of destiny, if you want to impress your friends online, but credit your grandfather, former ceramics artist and small business owner. Your mom says your rat fuck of a father has on one occasion taken you on his weekend to see a baseball team play in New York, and I'm sure sorry about that. May this plague especially afflict the New York teams, or at least the guys in the rotation, with minor symptoms that force them all indoors. I understand you don't really care about baseball and are more interested in music, especially rappers. But even if even you would agree that the negotiators need to hang in there in that smoke-filled room and do their jobs. Yes? Bob, what if there were more Jewish players in the MLB? Jewish players can be technicians of the game, historians, analysts. They have feel. The game should still have room for that kind of a player, an expert in tactics and strategy. I can explain all of this to you on the phone, Bob, or you could come by to visit. We're over by the Tofi Mart and the IGA. Hope you're okay with an envelope instead of a call, and that your mother gives this to you, God damn it. I love you so much. Your granddad. May 24th, 2020. Hey, Bobby, I had a little something yesterday, a little something or other yesterday, maybe a stroke, don't know, a lightheaded floaty moment, and then I gave out, going to the John, banged myself up bad. It was embarrassing. I have a bit of a shiner today and other widespread contusions. The worst part about it was that there was this swarm of folks in the room and they're all wearing masks and hazmat gear, and I'm on the floor in the bathroom in a puddle, and they're trying to drag me out and be safe, but it's like I'm made out of hazardous materials. Don't touch the geezer. Do you know what plutonium is, Bob? I think they made one of the atom bombs out of it, the ones they used during the big war. Anyway, your granddad has had a few black eyes before, because your granddad, Bob, was once a hellraiser. I'm talking about in the later 60s and into the 70s. And I had a motorcycle for a while, which wasn't too smart, because that's how I broke my collarbone. I probably shouldn't be telling you all of this, but the part of the story that has a moral is the part where I give all that up in 1997 when the blood sugar starts spiking. I had a bit of a wake-up call and I went back to Temple. Remember, you can come anytime and visit. They have movie night once a week. Mostly they get piss poor family films like they think we're all imbeciles. I gotta go. My hands hurt. Love you so much. Your granddad. That's my little thing.
Wow. Thanks, Rick. That was really awesome. And I think I'm going to move right in with the questions. You did a little promotion for this event, and you said you're going to read from work that's in a new direction. So, writers are always micromanaging their words and their thoughts and their process. So tell us a little bit about what you mean by a new direction in this work, and perhaps why it headed that way.
Well, I was specifically referring to this passage, which is like 20 pages long. And it's just, I can't tell, of course, because I made it and it's only like on draft 5 or something. But my preliminary analysis of it would be that it's utterly emotionally direct, which I would say would not necessarily be the first thing people would say about my work in the last 15 years, let's say. That it's more often had a fair amount of conceptual apparatus and, and has been sort of language first. But what I'm trying to do is sort of talk about where we are a little bit. And I think talking about where we are so far in the recent passages has entailed wanting to sort of really be with these characters, really get in there and sort of see what they're like, and not in a sentimental way, because this guy turns out to have done some bad shit, but he's still a guy who loves his grandson, and that increasingly becomes the material of the letters. So so I wanted to sort of just be there for the protagonist and not editorialize.
All right, so you were talking about writing in the present. Obviously, one of your early books took place in 1973, and you were stated music's very important to you, and you stated you only listened to songs from 1973 while you were writing it. And you know, of course, this is a process question. Did you just listen to the songs from 1973 that you liked, or did you listen to all of them, even like the ones that really irked you?
So ones that irked me. I'm trying to remember now what year. We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun. I'm trying to remember if that was like 72 or 71, but I would choose anything, you know, anything that was popular in 1973. And I even went to like, you know, Billboard and got the old charts and used them, you know. I think Rock the Boat by the Hughes Corporation might have been 1973. That was a big one, you know. But then like the obvious album-oriented rock stuff, which my older sister was really into then.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever done that with music for any of your other writings?
No, what I started to feel after a while was that was unnecessarily restrictive. And you know, I can't tell you that listening to, you know, Close to the Edge by Yes 5,000 times made The Ice Storm a better book. I don't know that did. I mean, do you know that story, Tim, called Pierre Menard, author of The Quixote by Jorge Luis Borges? Do you know that story?
Yeah, but it's been a while. I think I might have read it in college. But
so it's about this guy who wants to spontaneously produce Don Quixote by Cervantes, except he's in France in the 20s. And he doesn't want to produce a version of Don Quixote. He wants to produce the exact same text, but he doesn't want to copy it out. He just wants to spontaneously produce it. And he decides that he should, you know, his first thought is he should try to learn, you know, 16th century Castilian and only read books about knights, and then he'll spontaneously produce Quixote. Well, that was sort of kind of how I wrote the Ice Storm. Like, if I just completely restrict my cultural diet to 1973, then I'll naturally produce this book.
right. So some of your there's a question in the chat, some of your character development, what is your regular process for developing characters, and what is some of the stranger characters that you have developed?
I mean, that's probably a value judgment that I'm not best equipped to make. Certainly the sort of protagonist of Hotels of North America was a pretty desperate guy with a lot of problems. He was pretty out there. I mean, I feel like to do characters, for me anyway, it's a process of discovery, and it involves dramatizing and putting them in situations. And then the more you do that, the better you know them a little bit.
So thoughts about, in terms of putting stuff in your novels, when did you decide to put the pandemic in your work? And does it ever bother you that once it comes out, maybe the pandemic is older and it will read as kind of stale?
I am worried about that. I mean, I'm not worried about it in the sense that I don't care, because really I want to talk about where we are. And, you know, I was writing professionally and publishing during 9/11, and I really vividly remember the kind of paralyzing silence that many writers felt, you know, in the months after 9/11. and I felt like it started to creep into literature in a way. I wrote this kind of crazy novella called The Albertine Notes. Like, that was a sort of faux science fiction novella, like 6 or 8 months after 9/11. And it got written because I couldn't not in some way want to deal with what was happening around me. And so this piece is coming out of the same urgency. And it's less the case that I feel like, oh, it's going to make good material, or it might be good for such and such a magazine or something, and much more what material is calling to me, you know. And if it wants to get written, and I can't not do it in some way, then to me that's a good reason to continue on. But there's a scene in the book that's about the Tulsa rally, Trump's rally in Tulsa in June, and you know, it doesn't get into the politics. Like the character who goes to the rally is you know, a real troubled individual, and his whole reason to go to the rally is some friend of his says, hey, you should come to this thing. He doesn't even know what it is. He doesn't care. He's not paying attention. So it's less that I'm trying to say a bunch of political things, and more that I'm really trying to describe sort of subjectivity in this environment and what it feels like to be a thinking, feeling person through all of this. And I guess, I hope that that can't age in a way that renders the material uninteresting.
There's a lot of comments about how, in the piece you just read, how warm and alive and how wonderful that character is. But the only question generated out of that was, Rick, do you have a grandson?
No, in fact, I have a 4-year-old is what I have. Even though I'm, you know, turning 60 next year, I have a 4-year-old. So it's really sort of about me and my 4-year-old in some fashion. You know, my dad's still living, and my dad is besotted with my son, as he is with most of his grandchildren, all of his grandchildren. But for some reason, he's taken a special shine to this 4-year-old, probably because it's the last grandchild he's going to have. So in a way, I was also trying to describe that sort of special bond that grandparents feel.
Are you still teaching over at Brown, or?
I am.
And that's all virtual these days?
It's all virtual, yeah.
You had said in an interview that you love your students, and you love teaching them and you love their writings. So the new students that you're getting, what editing tool do you find the student writers or even new writers just don't do enough of?
Here's a really interesting one. A couple of my students are here, I think. Susanna, I saw you somewhere here. Susanna might
Without
be
using names, tell me what they're doing.
She might be able to back me up here because she also teaches. Here's the thing they never do. The Generation Z students never use who as a pronoun. They always say that. So he's a guy that works in advertising. Like, they will never say he's a guy who works in advertising. What happened to that? What's so bad about that? Why is that a thing that's suppressed? I want to recreate that and make it happen again. Also, they just systematically can't understand that the word is not nauseous, the word is nauseated. They just will not understand. And I don't know what the general rule is, but maybe the general rule is this. That little stuff that you think doesn't matter. When I was, you know, at one point when I was in my 20s, I worked at a publisher in New York, and that was my day job. And the copy desk at this publishing house was super anal. The head of copy editing was like ridiculously punctilious. And I had to write catalog copy, and then she would copy edit the catalog copy. And one day she came to my desk and she flung my copy down and she said, "It's so sloppy. If you learn to do this, you will be a better person." That's what she said to me. And I thought, fuck off, lady, go away. But then I sort of started to feel like maybe there was some method to her madness. And I started, taking her suggestions and using the Chicago Manual of Style now and then. And I feel that was a sort of essential moment in my education as a writer.
We have a question from DeWitt. He grew up near King of Prussia, and he's very familiar with the mall. So how much research do you need when you're writing about these locations?
Well, it happens with Philly that my late sister lived there for a really long time. There are a couple of mentions in the story of the Mummers Parade. People from the Philly area know about the Mummers Day Parade. You don't know about it?
I do. I went to the University of Delaware, and the next day in the student lounge, everyone was all hung over like students are on New Year's Day, and they sat around like the Mummers are on, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
Mummers Day Parade is like so incredible. And it was like a thing with my sister that I would, in this one period, go and stay at her place for the weekend to watch the Mummers Day Parade and stuff. And but anyway, because she lived in Philly, I got to know Philly a little bit. And for a while, she lived just outside in the sort of, mainline suburbs and stuff. So, so I just know it a little bit. I never lived there, but I do feel like, the research is easier to do now than it ever was in my time of writing. Like the Google Earth thing is really remarkable, Like I'm trying to do this passage set in Alabama right now. And so I've been just going down the roads outside of Birmingham, checking stuff out, And imagine if, Thomas Pynchon, when he was describing Morocco and in Gravity's Rainbow, if he was famously used the Baedeker guides to do all that. What if he could have had Google Earth and Google Maps to go cruising around and look at stuff? I feel like it's really good for literature.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I looked up the whole Phoenix area for a book, and that's so helpful. Question here: do any of your 52 characters ever connect, even tangentially?
That's such a good question, and it's something that I'm trying to arrange. Yeah, I feel like there has to be mutual implication across the text. Like, here's the thing. I want it to be able to be read out of order. Like, I don't want it to be that you have to start with Alabama and go all the way to Washington, alphabetically. I want it to be that you could, if you grew up in Kansas, that you can skip to Kansas. So it doesn't have an arc in the sense that, it's going to crank up a sort of central narrative conceit. But I feel like motif and reiteration as sort of musical gestures are necessary, and I'm going to work toward that.
All right, well, here's a question, and it's about your fiction, but I was going to talk about The Long Accomplishment. So maybe you can answer a little bit from both perspectives. Have you ever used material in life in fiction that you regretted later? And I know in The Long Accomplishment, your character starts with a recovering alcoholic who's a sexual compulsive and has a history of depression, all things dear to my heart, believe me. And were you ever, those are all kind of taboo subjects to a lot of people. So did you ever feel judged by having a memoir and writing about those things?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I would maybe not write The Long Accomplishment if I had it to do over again. Or, I wrote it because I couldn't not write it. Like at the time that all that stuff was happening, it was very difficult to invent and imagine in the way that I had done it before then. And a lot of the book, you probably know this, Tim, but a lot of the book is about the struggle in my marriage to have a child, my 4-year-old, and in the sort of great difficulty of all of that, there was just nothing else that could be thought about. It wasn't just that there was no room for fiction. There was just nothing else even to think about. And so I wrote what I wrote, in a kind of desperation to have something to do or some steam release in the middle of what was a lot of difficulty. And so that's what came about. Whether it should have been published is a whole secondary question, And I think it's possible to sort of wake up later and feel like maybe I shouldn't have done that. But, every time I get a letter from someone who says, that book had a special use for them or articulated things that they hadn't seen articulated, then I guess it's okay to have suffered a little bit from some of the more strenuous opinions of the book.
All right. So also we got a question from Doc Janning. It says, does your work include a scene of flag burning as flag retirement for tattered and faded flags?
What a great idea. It does now.
He says, yeah, you can have that idea. Sure. I'm giving it from Doc to you without permission.
Thank you, Doc.
And I promised myself, even though I can talk to you for hours, to finish with you at 7:40. So I think we got to most of the questions. I apologize if I didn't get to all of them, but the final question has to do with the Hotels of America. And somebody described it as struggling white man. I've never seen you describe it as such, but moving along those lines, has the idea of, middle-aged white man, the way it's viewed at now, has that changed how you might write about it in terms of the recognition for more marginalized groups that sort of, there's a lot of put down for the old white man because, we've been privileged. And along with that, since you first started and approach has changed to how people are approached and written about. Has that changed how you write? I always like to end on a really rambling question, by the way.
Well, that's a very difficult question to, summarize. The first thing I would say about it is, I would dearly like to write about people who don't look like me. And I have done a little bit. I'm not married to a white person. And the fact of that has been a great opportunity for thinking and feeling about these questions that in my case and in the history of my family was long overdue. So I feel like one thing that I can do is stay educable and to bring what I know about language to the problematic scene of making narratives in history now, which is what I'm doing. But what I really don't want to do, and I feel is, essential for writers who unfortunately come from privilege the way that I do, is to presume to know and to start writing stories that, are not my story, thinking that I have access to them, which I think would be a big mistake. So I feel like the marketplace gets to decide what's valuable and what's useful. That's what the whole idea of use value is about, right? And that's great. I feel like the greater visibility for writers of color right now is great. And for example, I have right here my copy of Interior Chinatown, which I'm so excited I just started it in the last couple of days, and I'm really very excited by this book and excited to read it, and so excited that it won the National Book Award. And I'm always particularly excited when Asian American writers get a boost. And I think that's all great, and that's as it should be. And I don't have like a cultural impact meter in my writing room that says, you haven't reached the 20 level today, so your writing is not valid. I never feel that way about it. I just think, what am I going to make today, and how am I going to make this paragraph better? And the readership's allowed to do whatever they want. If my thing is not valid now because of the sort of historical problems associated with my demographic, I totally understand and I accept that.
All right, a quick one that is a lot easier to summarize. So in the movie, The Ice Storm, it had Kevin Kline, Christina Ricci, Elijah Wood, Katie Holmes, Sigourney Weaver. Who most represented their character true to the book? And did Ang Lee consult with you at all?
Well, James, who wrote the script, did. James Seamus wrote the script, and he kind of kept me in the loop. I read the first draft and I made comments, some of which they took and some of which they didn't. I never felt like they had an obligation to be true to the book. What I was hoping was that A, they would make a good film, and B, that their really good film would somewhere on the poster have the line based on the novel. And if it had that, then I was in pretty good shape. But they made a really good movie. Like, it's a really good movie, and it's not identical with my book. And I don't care particularly. And, it happened that a lot of people read the book because of the movie. So that's all good. I think that many of them were sort of like the characters in the book. Oddly, what's the name of the Homeland, My So-Called Life? Claire Danes. I really thought Claire Danes should play the Christina Ricci part. And I had this conversation with James Seamus where I said, got to get Claire Danes. I think the character is meant to be blonde in the novel, but I was willing to allow Claire Danes to be a redhead and still be in the movie. And then they said, oh, we got Christina Ricci. And the film that she was in right before the ice storm was called That Darned Cat. And I thought that was a pretty bad movie. And I didn't think Christina Ricci was in the right direction in any way, shape, or form. But you know what? I think her performance is electrifying. I think it's one of the great things in the movie. And so even though she doesn't look like the character in the book, like, she has this kind of simmering vulnerability, like a real complexity in her portrayal that I really admired. And so I'm happy that she's there. And I don't even think about Claire Danes much.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and reading and answering so many questions. What is your favorite indie bookstore that someone can log on to and help them out and also purchase some of your books?
Um, well, I'm in Rhode Island, as I said. The really good, kind of fascinating indie that I use in Providence is called 20 Stories. They're online, they're great. I really like Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn. I've read there a bunch of times. Um, love the owners, love the vibe. So that's a good store. I have extended family in the Portland area, so I often go to America's largest independent bookstore, Powell's. What a great store.
All right. So thank you once more. And I'm now going to say goodbye to our friends that are on Facebook. And if you folks ever want to be involved in the Q&A and or the open mic, you can sign on to the Zoom link. And but I do appreciate you watching through Facebook.